The focus of the presentation, and I'm going to give Chris just 2 minutes or a couple of minutes before we start the presentation, we'll focus on 3 main components: the research approach that we used, the findings of the research, and I'll be talking to those 2 components. And then I'll hand over to Chris, and he will, at the end of the presentation, talk about the sorts of interventions that citizens in Gauteng believe are necessary in order for us to address the crime situation in the province. What's important to emphasize was that the project was done and funded by the Gauteng Department of Community Safety. They issued a tender, and Sedibeng Satsebo was successful in getting the tender, and that's how we started the project. And some of you might be thinking, well, this study was done in 2018. Does it remain relevant to the situation that we have now in 2022? And I just want to ask Chris to very quickly just give us a brief overview of the latest quarterly crime statistic that have been released by the South African Police Service. And that gives us the context of why the survey and why the work that we did on this particular area was so important. Chris?
Well, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I was shocked. I was actually in Bloemfontein on Friday when the stats was released, visiting some family there. But I was literally shocked when I got the figures because the media was phoning me. I mean, this country, for the first time, as long as I can remember, when we kept stats in a united South Africa since 94, reached an increase of murder, the country as a whole, of above 16%. For the year, I actually immediately calculated the year and I compared with 2019-20. If we look at Gauteng, because this is specifically the survey, specifically Gauteng, and we just look at the last quarter, I'm still doing calculations on the whole year, past year, but murder up with 45.2%. This is absolutely unnatural. I must say, I think this is shocking. Attempted murder, 31.7%. Carjacking, 26.1% up. Truckjacking, 32.5% up. And robbery aggravated in general, which includes street robbery, is up 10.6%. Now, I think that says enough. It says that we are in deep trouble. And I think that is why we also find these attitudes, which Craig will now present to us.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so let's just move on to the study approach that we utilized. So the study was done in the 40 high crime police precincts of Gauteng, and the map on the left-hand side shows you where those particular police stations are in relation to the different local municipalities covering the whole of Gauteng. And then on the right-hand side, you will see a list of the different police stations, the 40 police stations where the survey was conducted. So it covers, all the different clusters that you've got from Johannesburg Central through to Johannesburg East, including Hillbrow, Johannesburg North, Midrand, Sandton, the western part of Johannesburg, including Diepsloot, Honeydew, Randburg, Roodepoort. Then also it covers a number of the important police stations within the Ekurhuleni area, from Benoni in the central areas to Etwatwa, Duduza, Tsakani, all the way through to Ivory Park, Kempton Park in Ekurhuleni North, Tshwane East, North, including Shoshanguve and Temba, Tshwane West, Attridgeville and Pretoria Central, Soweto East, that would be Eldorado Park, and West would be Dobsonville, Jabulani in Morocco, and then also 2 police stations in the Sedibeng area, and then also in the Western Rand that would include Krugersdorp as well. So these are the police stations that were surveyed in the study. And just from a scientific point of view, it's important to emphasize the methods that we utilized in conducting this because it ensured the representativity of the sample. So we utilized what we call a random multi-stage stratified cluster sample with what we call probability proportional to size. And the population that we were focusing on is the population 16 years and older. So what we were able to do is to conduct a survey. We sampled 3,600 citizens across the whole of the Gauteng area. What this equates to is approximately 90 citizens being interviewed in each of the different police stations. And because the population size or the target population of 16 years and older differs quite significantly from one police station to another, we also used a disproportional sample allocation to ensure that the smaller stations had sufficient numbers of people being interviewed. The sampling frame that we used were 2017 population estimates. And in essence, we interviewed around about 20 citizens in each enumeration area. This is what we call a self-weighting sample. And we did 20 respondents because of the risk factors that the field teams were facing in the different areas. What was also important to emphasize is that we covered all the different types of areas that you would experience within a police station. Formal urban areas, informal urban areas, and even formal rural areas were included. So that was the sampling strategy that we utilized. Sedibeng Satsebo, our fieldwork company, then managed the project and the fieldwork. And the fieldwork was conducted between the 20th of February to the 11th of March in 2018. They had 4 teams of 52 interviewers. In other words, we had about 13 people in each team, and those 13 went into an enumeration area and literally saturated the area to enable them to participate in the study. Very strict fieldwork protocols were followed. We were contacting the local municipalities. We engaged with every single police station within the areas that we were doing the survey. We engaged with ward councillors, community security agencies, all to inform them of the study. And each of them was given a letter of introduction from the department to let them know that we were in the area and what we were doing in terms of the survey. We utilize this sort of fieldwork mapping when we do this type of work. This allows the fieldwork teams to accurately navigate into the area where they have to conduct the survey. And we also have these little yellow points, as you can see on the map. And those yellow points are what we call visiting points. So the surveyor has to go to particular points within the selected sampling enumeration area in order to conduct the interviews. Now, having reached those particular visiting points, what one then does is one then lists all of the households and individuals at that particular visiting point, and one household and then ultimately one individual is randomly selected in order to participate in the survey. Ultimately, what we were able to do was to interview 3,070 people, and we had significant problems in the field. There were areas, for example, like Hillbrow and Jeppe, which were literally no-go areas. Our field teams really escorted out of those areas. And what was surprising to us was that a number of the suburban areas refused to allow us to participate. These are not security villages. These are just ordinary suburban areas. But they absolutely said we can't conduct the survey in the area because they have had so many people come through those areas with similar sort of dress, looking like interviewers, and they were robbing those particular areas. The survey was representative of the different citizens in Gauteng. The gender and age profile is generally a reflection of the general population with slightly more females. And also most of the people that were interviewed were in the 26 to 40-year age group. While there were 18.7% who were full-time employed in the study, we also had 25% of the people that were interviewed that were unemployed. And this is quite reflective of the unemployment rate within the country and within the province. Over half of the respondents have lived in the area for more than 10 years. So these are people that have lived in the area over a sufficient time period in order for them to have a clear understanding of the safety and security issues in those particular areas. What was also very important to emphasize is that 94% were South African citizens. So a very small proportion were non-nationals that were participant in the particular survey. The median income of the respondents was between 1,000 and 4,000 Rand per month. And there was a predominance of African black people at 84% participating in the survey. And a high proportion of the respondents had a grade 12, 36% in fact. So we had a very good spread of people across the 40 high crime police precincts that were participating in the study. So the research focus really was on 11 main sections, and this is what is shown on the slide at the moment. So we looked at perceptions to people feeling safe, the experience of crime, whether they had experienced sexual offences, the character of sexual offences, what sort of home safety measures they were implementing, the implications of having liquor outlets within these communities, how satisfied they were with the police services. We also looked at aspects of substance abuse and how prominent it is there and the contribution that it makes to crime in a particular area. We also looked at pedestrian safety and the availability of traffic officers in these different police precincts. We also looked at community safety initiatives and also asked questions about the use of CCTV as a preventative or a safety and security measure within the police stations. And then we also looked at particular issues relating to disturbances. The questionnaire was designed by the department, and our team, which consisted of a very professional team, well versed in terms of criminological research, was then given the opportunity to do inputs to the questionnaire. And what I'm going to be presenting in the next sections is just a few of these particular areas that we covered in the survey. If people are interested, they can contact me and I can provide them with much more detailed information from the survey that was conducted in the 40 police precincts. Now, if one looks at perceptions on safety, 37% or more than 1 in 3 people in these police stations feel very unsafe at night. But what's interesting to see is that in a place like Hillbrow, 85% of people feel unsafe at night. And in a place like Eldorado Park, 75% of people feel unsafe. Now, people are less fearful of their safety during the day, but still 25 or 1 in 4 people felt very unsafe. And again, it's the two areas of Eldorado Park at 58% and Hillbrow at 57%, which felt unsafe during the day. And if one then compares that to the National Victims of Crime Survey, less people feel unsafe during the day in Gauteng, but more people feel unsafe at night than the national average in Gauteng. So areas where people feel the most unsafe in these police stations are at bus and train stations and taxi ranks, but also they emphasized that just walking from their place of residence to the closest shop, they felt unsafe. So I think it tells us a lot about, if the police were to implement strategies to bring about a greater feeling of safety in these communities, there needs to be a focus on these high priority areas of the bus stations and train stations and taxi ranks, the presence of the police, but also a presence of the police near commercial centres where people are walking, in order to give them the feeling that the police are there to help them if they get into trouble. The place that 41% of respondents indicated across the whole of the province that they would not walk alone in was the centre of Johannesburg. Now, as many of you will know, many of the private corporations have started to establish their own precincts within Johannesburg, and the reason why they've done that is because of the high crime situation and this feeling of unsafety in the centre of Johannesburg. Also, 64% of the citizens felt that police visibility and patrolling will definitely address these feelings of being unsafe. If we then look at experiences of crime, over 20% of the people indicated that they'd been a victim of crime in the last year. Now, the worst of police stations, when one looks at aggravated robbery, was Midrand, and when it comes to street robbery, was Randburg. And in many ways, if you think about the economic activity and the character of those particular police stations, this makes a lot of sense. 55% of the people indicated that they have reported any and all crimes that they've experienced, but equally so, 39% had said that they don't report crime to the police. So the crime reporting rates from the survey were found to be the highest in police stations like Krugersdorp, Roodepoort, Jeppe, and Langlaagte. And as we go through the results, you will see that there are particular reasons why you are having these higher reporting rates in police stations like Krugersdorp. The lowest levels of crime reporting were in Pretoria Central at 72%. So, these values are quite high at 72%, but this was some of the lower values of reporting that one sees in the different police stations that we surveyed, including Bronkhorstspruit at 69% and Sandton at 61%. People feel the greatest contribution to causing crime was unemployment, where 54% said it was unemployment. And then also 40% of the people interviewed said that drug abuse plays a critical role in the crime situation within their different police stations. So the sort of interventions that people said they needed, and if you look at the right-hand side of my slide, you'll see a word chart, and 38% of people said, look, in order to address the crime situation, we have to have the creation of jobs. And jobs, in many instances, is the dominating factor which one finds from all forms of survey that is required in order to bring about a change in the socioeconomic character in our country and also to address a crime. Now, many people will say, well, the problem with that is that this is something that is out of the control of the police. But 25% of the people that were interviewed said that police patrolling should be done. And this is something that is definitely within the control of the police. So a statement that was made by one of the respondents that we interviewed really sums this whole aspect of experience of crime. And the respondent said there would be no crime in this area if we have patrols and neighborhood watches. So this is the perceptions of people in addressing these particular issues across these 40 high crime police precincts. Now, there is evidence both internationally and in South Africa that intelligence-based policing, visible policing, clearly reduces the more policeable crimes. But I'm truly of the belief that it's not only the policeable crimes which will see a reduction if you see more police presence in these different police stations. I think that it could well be attributed to declines in even murder rates within particular areas. 56% of Gauteng citizens believe that police visibility by patrolling in vehicles is the most effective way to combat crime. 41% don't believe that there is enough police visibility in patrolling. And the police stations where this was the most prevalent was in Dobsonville, Temba, Kagiso, Eldorado Park, Roodepoort, and so forth. So again, Eldorado Park as an example, a lot of the other police stations that I've mentioned are police stations where they're showing fears of crime, the experience of crime is high, and the reason being is that there is a low visibility of policing in those particular areas. In these high crime police stations, 43% said they had never seen a police patrol in the area during the day, and 45% said that they hadn't seen any patrols at night. If one looks at the Rietgat police station in Mabopane, which is just north of Pretoria, it had the lowest level of police patrolling during the day and night, and this was followed by the two police stations of Shoshanguve and Temba. These are all police stations within the Tshwane area and to the north of Pretoria. And then just over 40% of the people said they knew where the hotspots were in their areas, especially in places like Eldorado Park, Johannesburg Central, and Jabulani. So there's a clear knowledge of these are the hotspot areas. And the question then being is that are these hotspot areas being patrolled by the South African police? And in essence, the response from citizens was, no, this is not the case. Where patrolling was being done, and again, it's interesting to see which of the police stations come to the fore here, was Krugersdorp, Hillbrow, and Pretoria Central. So you can see that there is a situation, and this was in 2018, in Krugersdorp police station, where that police station was doing enough to ensure people feeling more trust towards the police and feeling safer in that particular community. Now, if we look at satisfaction with police services, Gauteng compared to the other provinces are quite a small province relatively, and it is densely populated as we know. But what this does mean is that the police stations are generally quite close to one another. So in Gauteng's 40 high crime police stations, 32% indicated that when a crime was reported to the police, they didn't arrive. Another 26% indicated that when they reported a crime, the police only arrived 2 hours later. So this is definitely not good enough. And if one compares this situation in these 40 high crime police precincts to the rest of Gauteng, the rest of Gauteng is actually better. So the worst police stations when it comes to never arriving were Midrand, Cleveland, Roodepoort, and Ivory Park, while the best were Brakpan and Itwatwa. Now, it's not too surprising to see that 77% of the citizens in the 40 high crime areas said they were not satisfied with the police's response rate. And what's also not surprising is that in the Brakpan area, 78% of the people said they were satisfied with the response rate, but in Itwatwa, which was also the other police station that I mentioned a little bit earlier, only 19% were satisfied. Now, this is because there are other factors than the police just arriving on time that need to be fulfilled in order for the citizens to be satisfied. And this includes the police showing commitment to addressing the crime, them being trustworthy, and also being sensitive to the citizens' needs, and very importantly, being able to show that they are solving crimes in these different areas. Now, because of these factors, only 50% of citizens trust the police in Gauteng's 40 high crime police stations. Asked why they don't trust the police, people said it's because of poor performance, them not being active in combating crime, and there being higher levels of corruption. But one of the things that clearly came out of this survey is that citizens recognize the importance of the police. They are the citizens' protector. They are dependent on the police to look after them, especially in low per capita income communities where people don't have the means necessary to look at expensive home security. So the police must play a critical role in re-establishing the trust with citizens. And what's also very important is that the government must provide the necessary resources for the police to be able to do their job. 51% of the citizens said that the government was not doing enough in trying to address crime in the 40 high crime police precincts.
I think these findings that Craig gave us highlight especially the lack of police visibility. People just don't see the police in their areas anymore. They don't see them at the day and they don't see them at night. And then they experience crime, which means that fear levels is just growing all the time. And people are in fear crime will happen to them. And they are especially afraid of murder and attempted murder. So we have to do something about police visibility. I also want to say, and I said it over many webinars and in public, that there are some of my colleagues who don't believe in police visibility. There are even some colleagues who don't believe in prevention. But the fact of the matter is, in a country like ours with this high levels of violence and this high levels of crime, that is actually the only thing we can do. Because if the murder is increasing as it is increasing now, and over the last 10 years, then the detective service can't handle that at all. Actually, it may lead to the explosion of the detective service. Now, police visibility must always be based on intelligence. It's not just a case that, you know, when a police vehicle go from the police station to the cafe to buy a bread and milk, that is police visibility, because that area may have no crime at all. Police should be visible at the place and the time that a certain crime occur. So if we know that carjackings is occurring in a certain street or in a certain area where there's poor lighting, and it is happening at between 6 o'clock now in winter when it's dark already, and 8 o'clock when people arrive back at home, then that area, that specific street corner or that specific street should be policed at that time. You may shift the crime to another area and to another time, but your analyst in the station should keep abreast of those developments and should always constantly inform that, look, we have now a shift of this crime from area X to area Y, and at that time of the day. This crime intelligence is generated through crime mapping. The police stations all have CAS, Crime Administration System, on their computers. And on top of that, there is a crime mapping, a GIS instrument. So when they register a case, it should be registered against the address. In formal settlements, you may find the situation, they don't have a specific address, but then actually it should be mapped by the handheld GPS. So it should be mapped. There should be linkage analysis of the crime. Different dockets, say of carjacking, of murder, of house robbery, should be linked to each other constantly, because in many cases, it's the same group who commit this crime, which will have the same description. 3 guys with black balaclavas, blue clothing, whatever. And the one have got a mark on the right side of his face. And then also, what must be done is environmental assessment. If a crime constantly occur at a certain time, at a certain place, the crime analyst at station should go to this place and see what in the environment, in the social or in geographical or in any other environment, what is the factors that can possibly cause this crime. But the problem is actually that you will have no correct police visibility if there's a shortage of experienced analysts, if the station management is negative towards this thing of crime analysis, if you don't have enough operational vehicles or human resources boots on the ground. Now, unfortunately, we have read in the last months and years that some of the stations in Gauteng and everywhere in South Africa only have about half of the vehicles that they should have. That half of the vehicles, or even 60% of the vehicles, are in the garage for repairs. And some of those vehicles stay there for 6 months, 8 months, or even a year to be repaired. Now, that means you have 50% or 60% less visibility. Also, my experience, because I move around, I meet people in the street, and I meet people that I've trained when I was the police 9 years ago. And I say, oh, you're still busy with analysis at this station. No, 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 no. I was either promoted to some other post, which have nothing to do with analysis, or I'm working for a private company now, doing that analysis that you have trained me to do. And so at the station these days, there's a big shortage of analysts. And then just one more point on the management negativity. I have seen in stations where management is very positive towards analysis and where they use this information, it is very effective. Crime is decreasing. But in some stations, for example, where they don't listen to this, to the analyst, where they are negative towards the analyst, nothing is happening to crime. Before I come to this slide, I want to say that as a taxpayer, and every one of us are taxpayers, we, and according to the Constitution, it is the government's job to create a situation where we can live without fear, and where we can, and it is in the Constitution, we can be free of fear so that we can do our work, that we can be busy with the development of this country, which will then eventually lead to a situation where people will not be in a position where they have to commit crime, because they will have a job, there will be plenty of development, there will be investment. But at the present moment, unfortunately, security companies should be a force multiplier. I see it in my own area here, that you don't see the police, but you see at least security companies. But then we must also remember that this is not to say that security companies will replace the police. They can just help to have more visibility. And then also we should definitely remember that these companies will not be active in poor areas, and they will not be active in informal settlements where most of our crime is occurring. Those people can't afford security companies, so they won't be visible there. I mean, security companies are businesses. They need money to operate. But unfortunately, I think wherever they are, they should actually be coordinated by the police, given information by the police to help with visibility, to be visible in those areas and at those times where crime is high at a certain street corner or street. The role of local government in crime prevention. Now there I can talk for hours, because I think the police are guilty of a lot of things, especially for not enough visibility. But unfortunately, local government, especially where I live, is failing because streetlights are not on at the right time. But it seems these streetlights doesn't switch on with a day and night switch, so that when night come, it automatically say, okay, it's dark enough, I will switch on, and then in the morning it will switch off. It seems they are connected to a meter. And what you see these days with especially load shedding, that lights are burning during the day, wasting energy, electricity, but in the night it's off, because the timer have gone haywire with all of this load shedding. It doesn't stop with street lights. That's a very important thing. But tall grass. You see along some of our roads, terribly long grass, which is a danger, because if it catch fire, I mean, cars will be in danger. These tall grasses and things that grow everywhere, it's a hiding place for criminals. And when people pass on their bicycles, they get robbed. They get robbed of these very expensive bicycles. It is also so that when the SIAC or the CIMAC at station, these analysts, if they find that a certain area is conducive to crime, they should actually report it to the local council, so that the council can then do something about that environment. And I refer there to examples of Grayston. Now, I don't know if it's still a problem, but I can remember when I was still in the police, Grayston were a hotspot for carjackings, because you get peak times, you get quite heavy traffic there, and that is an opportune place to hijack a vehicle and then to get away with it. And the reason why we had all those hijackings and robberies at Grayston was the tall grass at the off-ramps and on-ramps. I say that there should also be a GPS of all high-risk outlets on the station, should be on the GIS maps of the station. Now, a high-risk outlet is, for example, a mobile phone outlets, iPhone outlets, laptop outlets, bars, taverns, and licensor beans. All of those are, and jeweler shops, is where you have legitimate businesses like jeweler shops, cell phone, iPhone, and so on, which are always the target of groups of robbers. They like to strike those things even in the malls, but in the open malls even more so. They should also have on their maps all the bars, the taverns, and the license shebeens, and those places where people drink and where they socialize, because that is where you must check it, that there's not a high rate of assaults and attempted murder and common assaults at a certain shebeen or a tavern or a bar. If that happens, then at least you can do something. You can go to the bar and you can go to the tavern and speak to the owner and say, listen, if these things continue, we will have to reconsider your license. Then also illegitimate businesses. Now you will say to me, but they should close down illegitimate businesses, but we know that doesn't happen. And maybe it's better not to close it down. Like illegal shebeens, that should also be mapped on the station GIS. Brothels, red light areas. We have found many robberies happen at a certain time of the evening in certain streets. And when we did some environmental scanning, we found out that is a red light area. There's a specific area. Boysons was for many years, even today. Boysons is a station, very high levels of hijacking, and it was in a specific street where sex workers operate and where drugs are also sold. This creates the opportune situation for crime. CCTV cameras should be installed at high-risk areas. Now, I have heard, and I don't know if it's true, that there are many areas in Johannesburg now and many areas in Pretoria covered by CCTV. But the problem is many of them don't work. Also, if you can have the cameras and they can work, but it is not helping prevention. You may be looked after to see who did commit this crime and then be used by the detectives, but that's not my help. It should actually be used in a preventative way. So what you should have is people in the control room watching these cameras, and when they see a robbery occur in a specific spot, they should inform people in the street, police in plainclothes probably in the street, to then react very quickly and to catch the criminal on the job. So that is how it should work. If you have people there who doesn't have the attention span, not enough people in your control room to watch these cameras very constantly and to immediately activate people in the streets, a CCTV camera is not of much help. I refer here to a video fight option. I don't know, and I'm not going to mention the company. There is a company that work with this. But here where I live, we have got video fight cameras, and it's overlooking the nature reserve. And if there's any movement during the night on this video fight, even any human movement, it triggers a screen in the control room. The person immediately sees there's some human movement at 12 o'clock at night here. He informs me, even if I sleep, and he informs the security company that we use, and can then even decide not to put off the alarm, but to try and arrest that person. Eliot analysis, what I want to say, and I'm going to be very short on this one. This country have got quite a few research houses, people who can do research. There's plenty of analysts. But what I miss, and maybe I myself should have done it while I was in the police, but I didn't always have the capacity to do that. I was busy with operational issues. But the fact of the matter, I think, given the murder rate as just one and the attempted murder rate, our rape, sexual offenses, but especially rape and sexual assault, all those levels of crime, I would have thought that for many years, the last 30 years at least, we should have done research, multivariate analysis of different layers of crime data, policing data, census data. If you do all of this, we will eventually pinpoint all those factors who are the primary contribution to our crime situation.